Hey guys, welcome back to the Dreamcast. This is episode 48. I have no idea what Cub wore 48, but I'm sure we'll find that out as the night progresses. With me is a very sick Anno Catuli, who is going to be the silent partner tonight. And also with me is friend of the program, Mr. Josh Patterson. Good to see you, Josh.
You too, buddy. Greetings.
Yep, Josh is on the Twitters. You can follow him at CJW. We'll spell that out for you in the show notes. And of course, I'm Rice Cube. I am going to go by that name because I can.
Very good.
This is a Cubs broadcast. Not affiliated with the Cubs, but we're Cubs fans, and we gotta talk stuff. And we haven't actually done one of these in almost a month now because life got in the way, and you'll kind of notice that the blogs have kind of stagnated because honestly, it's just like a bunch of games. The Cubs are playing, they're doing well for a stretch, and then suddenly they have this like total brain fart and lose games that are totally winnable. But that's just one of those things that happens. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is about a 3 or 4 hour drive, depending on traffic. And I was fortunate enough to get up for all three of the games last weekend, which was fun. It was a lot of fun. If you followed my Twitter feed on Friday and Saturday night, you saw I got into a little bit of shenanigans, but nothing too terribly crazy. But just like you had said, they win some and they lose some, which that's kind of baseball. But I think about Friday, for instance, that they had the big lead, 7-1, then 10-4, and Pirates come back, and that game goes 12, and then they have the really one that felt secure on Saturday, and then the loss on Sunday that it didn't sting that much, I guess. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, because if you kind of think about it, it's a 162 game season where barely a quarter of the way through. The Cubs right now, they are officially 22-17, 5 games above 500, with the game happening tonight, or I guess now, depending on when we broadcast this thing, the series finale against San Diego, and they're 1-1 in San Diego. I mean, they could have won the first game. They definitely won the second game. It's one of those things, you never know where the ball's going to bounce. You never know when a guy's going to cut somebody off. You never know when a guy's going to give up a home run. It's just baseball.
Yeah, you
So,
never know when Chris Bryant and Starlin Castro and Addison Russell are going to all have an error in the same game. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? I'd say probably not very high. Maybe about 1 in 162. And lo and behold, that happened a couple nights ago. So,
yeah. And people would just need to keep things in perspective. I mean, right now, the Cubs, their bullpen is sort of kind of in shambles, and it's starting to get back again because they did have that off day before they traveled to San Diego, so they were able to actually use some guys to back up Shio Siwada, who had a great start, but third time through the lineup penalty and all that, they didn't want him to go the full 5. But I feel like the bullpen has been managed okay. It's just sometimes they don't perform, and that's bullpens for you. I mean, they're volatile for a reason, and there's a reason why really smart people say you don't invest that much in a bullpen. The
exactly.
bullpen is like, the last thing that you fix.
Yep. Let's say that the reason that you're in the bullpen is you're not good enough to be a starter.
Pretty much, man. But I'm happy with it. I mean, people were freaking out because Chris Bryant wasn't up for like 8 or 10 games, and then he came up like on day 12 of the season, where he was like finally just barely over the threshold for that 7th year of control. So yeah, coincidence. And then he promptly struck out like 5 times and yada yada yada. So even if you put in Chris Bryant and Addison Russell and Javi Baez comes back, they're still going to lose a few games.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, Yeah, and I think some Cubs fans have unrealistic expectations. Like, John Lester is getting paid $155 million. He's got to go 7 innings every time and never give up a run. Impossible. Even the best pitchers in the world, they will give up a run. Today, Clayton Kershaw gave up a home run to Madison Bumgarner. I mean, it happens. So the important thing to understand is that this is a marathon, and right now, over this particular stretch of the marathon, the Cubs are actually above the fray. They are in the wild card spot. They could potentially get within 3.5 games of St. Louis before they head to Arizona to play the Diamondbacks, who also suck. So anything can happen within this weekend.
Absolutely, and like you had said, it's definitely it's a long season. We've gone through about a month and a half, and the season's only a quarter of the way done. Um, and yeah, you have to kind of look for trends in the game. You have to look kind of at the big picture. You can't get too high and with the wins and too low with the losses, because there's going to be times where things are going great. They rattle off 5 or 6 in a row, and there's going to be times where ball just bounces weird and they lose. We'll say 7 of 10. The key is don't let yourself get too worked up, especially if you're in the clubhouse. And I think Madden's done a great job of that thus far. The reason why he's making the big bucks as far as it seems like when they win, they celebrate it for 30, 45 minutes, and then they're like, all right, let's get on to the next one. And they're not dwelling on the past for too terribly long, and you just can't in the game of baseball.
And even when they lose, they're not like, well, we made mistakes. And then Joe Madden goes on the press conference and says, why should I be upset? They played a really good baseball game. And just sometimes it happens. When they do make a mistake, he says, this guy made a mistake, that guy made a mistake, but they held themselves accountable and we'll fix it. So, why would you beat yourself up on it? It's 1 out of 162. Get over it.
And the fun part is if you extrapolate the Cubs record right now, their win percentage like 564, that's a 91 win season. 90 games has gotten you in the playoffs pretty much ever since the wild card has been in place. I mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but like last year, the Royals were an 87 or 88 win team, and they go to the World Series. Excuse me, sorry. So, if they can continue, for every quarter of the season, play 5 games over 500, that's going to be a 91 and 71 season, and I think any Cub fan would be happy with that, considering what the past few years have been.
Yeah, I think the longest losing streak they've had so far is a 4-game losing streak, and that was against Milwaukee and the Cardinals. I mean, it's just something that I blogged a while back. People are like, why are you losing to Milwaukee? Milwaukee's horrible. Well, Milwaukee's not that horrible. They still have Ryan Braun, who is not chopped liver. They still have Gene Skura, who was a pretty good prospect and is now a fairly solid major league player. So, honestly, it shouldn't matter. Like, it's still a major league team. They're going to lose. Like, even back when the Cubs completely sucked, they still took series from the St. Louis Cardinals, who went to the playoffs and the World Series. So it's not like it can't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to Braun and Segura, they still have Ramos Ramirez, and we saw what he did in a Cubs uniform, for all those years back in the 2000s. He was an integral part of 3 playoff teams. And one thing you'll find is that even the worst of the worst, like I think back to the 2003 Tigers, they still won 49 or 50 games. And they were basically fielding a AAA team, and they still won 50 games. This time in baseball, you're going to find no one's going to really win more than about 95 games. You might squeak up in the upper 90s, but even the worst teams are still going to win 50 or 60 games, and sometimes bad teams, and sometimes you're going to beat the bad teams.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I am okay with what's going on so far. I know that they're going to strike out. Like, people complain about that. They complain about, too many walks or other BS like that. I don't really care. They're making the pitchers work. And it was just like what most of us are saying. If they continue to grind out at bats like that, if they continue to say, okay, I'm going to see 4, 5, 6 pitches, it's going to take you 7 pitches to strike me out. It's going to take you 8 pitches for me to fly out to right. It's going to wear down the opposing pitchers, and I've seen that several times. Like even when the Cubs lose, they are able to dig into the bullpen. Like obviously they can't string together enough hits consistently to win like 30 of the first 39 games, but they're still winning the majority of their games, and I think that's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely. I'll say, they're, like you had said, they're grinding out the at-bats. Bryant and Rizzo are both in the, way up there as far as pitches seen. I think Chris Bryant is actually seeing the most pitches per at-bat of anybody in all of baseball. And he's on pace. I read a piece that Sahadav Sharma wrote very recently for BP Wrigleyville, where Bryant is on pace to see almost 200 full counts throughout the season, which means he's averaging over 1 full count per game. That's at least 6 pitches he's going to see each game, in one at bat. And if you can grind out those at bats, you get to those bad pitchers, and it may not pay dividends that night, but let's say it's the first game of the series, and you can get the starting pitcher out of there in 5 innings, and the bullpen has to go extra. That's just going to pay off down the line.
Yeah, and I think that happened several times. Like, we got kind of mad because there was a point where I don't remember which pitcher it was, but they got like 100 pitches in the first 4 innings, and then they couldn't attack on it anymore. Like those things will happen, but you got to take the positives. I mean, you got to say, okay, Chris Coughlin did hit 2 home runs and a pitcher's park and a loss, but those 2 home runs were very instrumental in helping the Cubs almost come all the way back from that error-filled game. Those things matter, and I think this team, they're respecting 90. They are doing like the little things. They're inexperienced. That's true. I mean, the core group is pretty much all guys under 25. So I'm coaching baseball right now. Like sometimes these kids, like they're 15, 16, 17, 18, they don't even know which base to throw to. So you're talking about kids who are barely out of college, barely out of high school, and you're asking them to be like Hall of Fame baseball players. Nuh-uh. Baseball is hard. Okay? And if it takes that long to teach a kid how to position himself, how to position himself on cutoffs, how to position himself to take a throw and fire to home plate or to the cutoff man. That kind of stuff takes time. And the fact that these guys are playing at such a high level and making as few mistakes as we can see, I think that's commendable.
Absolutely. No, I'm going to sound like Ron Coomer and say, I agree with that.
Yeah, we're a bunch of Ron Coomers because, we don't dwell on the negatives. I think like a lot of people come to our page and they're like, whoa, you're like the propaganda machine. And I'm just like, dude, I don't have enough time in my life to be negative, okay? I go to baseball so that I can enjoy myself, and I'm seeing this team getting built up. Of course, they sucked before, right? They absolutely sucked. But
Oh, absolutely.
But there was a plan in place, and for the first time since I've been a Cubs fan, I see a legitimate plan, and I think it's coming to fruition, and now, the naysayers can't say as many nays, and it's kind of fun to be in that position. And every now and then we get something on our page like, keep dreaming. Well, yeah, I mean, if you were a Boston Red Sox fan, you would still dream every single year for a World Series. It doesn't matter if you're a Cubs fan, a Texas Rangers fan who has never won the World Series, I guess a Washington Nationals fan who has never even been to the World Series. You dream about that. That's what baseball fans do. So I don't even know why you would think of that as an insult, but that's just me.
No, I don't blame you there. I mean, I look at it like this. Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer, when they came on board 3 years ago, they said, sorry, my son is apparently not wanting to go to sleep tonight for whatever reason. I'm not sure, but he'll be all right.
That's okay.
Yeah, he's laid out his plan. Not every step of it, obviously. He's got to keep some of it quiet, but he's laid out his plan. He said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build up the farm. We're going to, get impact talent in there all the way through. And that's what he's done. That's what the front office has done. They've laid out their plan, and they've taken the steps to get where they are. The plan is coming to fruition. You can see what the future looks like right now, plus what the future looks like 3-4 years down the line, and it looks really, really bright.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I don't recall. I think we basically follow the same people. So Stan wrote this really, really good article for BP Wrigleyville about the Rule 5 crunch. The Cubs basically have such a good farm system right now that they can't even keep them all.
Right. There's so many good players.
There's way too many good players. I think Dan Vogelbach is going to be Rule 5 eligible soon. There's a bunch of pitchers like Pierce Johnson who's about to be Rule 5 eligible. The Cubs basically have so many good players that some of them are going to have to go on the roster. So, if you got a DFA, Edwin Jackson or Brian Schlitter, we'll protect Pierce Johnson and Dan Vogelbach instead. Or maybe we can trade them. Let's trade them for a pitcher. Let's trade them for, I don't know, Johnny Cueto. That would be awesome. I know a lot of Cubs fans on Twitter are kind of reticent to trade for Cueto because the cost would be high, but at this point, you're going for it. I know they say I don't want to sell out for the future, but hey, if Johnny Cueto can deliver more than one win, like one win and a fractional win over the final 2 months of the season, you kind of have to go for it. And I think that's there's like other places like Oakland, for example, they have Scott Kazmir and maybe Ben Zobrist if they want a position player who's like even better than what we have now. So you can trade some of the surplus in the farm for that. And
that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
If you remember when Jason Parks did the podcast with Mike Farron, Parks would always say, talent is currency, and you can use that currency to, get what you need. I look at the Padres this past off season. They used a bunch of their talent down on the farm to get pieces for their major league roster. Is it necessarily paying off this year? No, but they used that minor league talent, to trade for pieces for the major league team. And that's what you have to do. You don't have enough positions for all of the players that you have on your major league roster and your minor league rosters. But if you can package 2 or 3 of them together and get a really good piece for the major league roster, then I say you do it. There's certainly the depth to be able to handle a loss like that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of Cubs fans are going to be like, oh my God, we just traded Javi Baez. Oh my gosh, we had to trade as Russell. But, they have, as you said, so much depth. They also have a plan in place to go ahead and just blow the budget for international free agent signings. And the thing is, with the international free agents, they are so far back, like they are like 16, 17 years old. So they're not even considered part of, I guess, the traditional transactions. So they are so far away from the Rule 5 that you have a buffer of time and of depth so that you can allow these guys to trickle up to AA and AAA and then start helping us dream again,
Absolutely.
So in addition to that, they can also trade for the competitive balance picks. They could trade for more pool money. They can, even with the way MLB has restructured the trading of draft picks rule, like immediately after the World Series, you could trade for someone else's previous draftee from that previous summer. So there are a number of different ways that the Cubs can reacquire that talent. So it's not that big of a deal if they want to do that. So
and the trade you just mentioned, you're talking about the rule that was in place where you previously had to wait 12 months after a player was drafted to trade him, correct?
Right. Basically the Trey Turner rule.
Okay.
They restructured it so that if you are drafted in the June draft, now you just wait till November. Suddenly you can be traded now instead of having to wait until the following June.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned Trey Turner. He played last year here in my hometown for the Tin Caps. Now he's kind of in limbo until uh, I guess next month when the draft is coming around here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think what was it? He was traded to the Nationals in a three-team trade.
That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll figure that out later. But
Yep.
essentially, like if the Cubs wanted to do some draft room thing and say, okay, we'll pick this guy, but we're actually going to trade it to you after the World Series for this other guy, so he can be our PTBNL
Right. No.
in the trade.
Yeah.
And that makes things a little more complicated, but it also makes things so much more fun.
No, I agree. And here's something. Just in years past, we kind of look forward to the draft, thinking, that was going to be a highlight of the year. I think it still is a highlight for a lot of Cub fans, but at the same time, with the focus being finally on the major league team, with things coming together and the team playing well, I don't think there's quite the build-up amongst Cubs Twitter for the draft this year because I really haven't heard that much about it compared to years past.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is a particular not so deep draft. I guess shallow.
Okay.
It's a shallow draft. So after the first three names, it's just like a cluster of meh. I wouldn't say meh because like a lot of them are still really good baseball players, but you don't have that one guy like a Brady Aiken before his elbow exploded, to say I want this guy. Or it's not as say 6 to 9 deep like when they drafted Albert Elmora or Javi Baez or Chris Bryant. Those drafts were really deep. So this is not as deep of a draft. So like if the Cubs decide to underslot and just go for depth, sure, but there are a number of good names. I'm not an expert in this because I unfortunately don't have time to pay attention to this. That's why I defer to guys like Cubs Den
Right, of course.
and Dan Kirby on Twitter. But there are guys, and you can tell because the Cubs are particularly good at maximizing their pool money.
Now, one thing I had seen mentioned on Twitter very recently, and I thought it was a neat idea. I know Houston has 2 draft picks in the top 5. With the way they're playing, I believe if they don't have the best record in all of baseball, I know it's right up there, which is kind of neat to see. Kind of not just because they're another good team and they kind of went the tank route like the Cubs did. With the 2 top 5 picks, I wonder would they pick one of the 2 guys in the top 5 as a piece that could potentially help them this year? Like, I think of the Fulmer kid out of Vanderbilt. He's pretty highly regarded as a pitcher. And then there's another one, Tyler J. He played for Illinois this year. I guess plays. I believe they're still playing. I wonder, if they or possibly the Cubs, if either one of those guys might slide down to their pick, would that be a route they might go? Thinking, okay, I know it's a bullpen arm, but it would be a way you wouldn't have to lose any sort of assets to possibly get a piece that could help you this year.
Yeah, so Houston, I don't particularly like Houston because of the way they treated Brady Aiken and the other guy. I forgot his name. Jason, is it Jason Nix? No, it was a different Nix.
Knicks, but yeah.
Okay, but they had a absolute plan. They didn't care what their fans thought. They were just kind of. I don't think they were as transparent as the Cubs were, or maybe they were even more so, depending on your point of view. But they definitely tanked, and they were just like, "We need to blow this stuff up, and we need to rebuild." So they got Carlos
Apparently they
Correa.
had a couple nearly 110 lost seasons.
Yeah, and so it helped them. I mean, they had some really good drafts, and even with the last draft where they screwed Aiken and the next fellow, they were still able to get some pretty good players, and now you see some of them trickle to the top, and it's very similar to what the Cubs did. Like, I think they're in a fairly good position, better than the Cubs, because still the Cubs have to contend with St. Louis and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, and Milwaukee isn't as bad as their record shows. But for whatever reason, everybody in the AL West is tanking right now. And even Oakland, I don't know what happened to Oakland. Like, they weren't supposed to be this bad, but they are just absolutely horrible this year. I think they're actually in line for the number one pick in the draft at this time. So you got to think about, okay, well, let's see all these trade partners. Like Toronto, for example, they bought Russell Martin, but at the same time, they're 18 and 24. And how long before they start saying, okay, we got to shop some of these guys. We got to shop Edwin Encarnacion, who the Cubs would probably not want because he's a DH, but, stuff like that. Do you want to trade for, certain pitchers off the Chicago White Sox? Do you want to trade for somebody off of Cleveland? So we're starting to look at the list of teams that are underperforming and with free agents who are, or free agents to be, so that you can start looking for rentals.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly you could probably add Cincinnati to that mix. I figure, if they go on a stretch where they lose 7 of 8 here in the next week or two, I would look for them to sell off because they're right on the tipping point to where they've got another year, maybe this year, if they can get it together and contend. But after that, they're going to lose 2 more pieces of their rotation. They traded away 2 of them this past offseason, but Cueto is done after this year. And they've got some contracts that are just going to hurt them for a long time. I mean, Votto is a good third or first baseman, but they've got him for about another 8 or 9 years. Brandon Phillips is still owed way too much money for his value at this point in time. So I think Cincinnati could do well to ship off some of their good pieces.
Yeah, I mean they already shipped off like let's see, Latos and Alfredo Simon. So they were already selling even before the season started, and now you're just waiting for them to sell off Aroldis Chapman or Johnny Cueto. It's up in the air whether the Cubs do it, but the beauty is the Cubs have so many options. They could decide, okay, you know what, we have so many shortstops in our system that if we decide to trade off Starlin Castro, God forbid, or Javi Baez, then so be it. Now we have an ace to bolster the front end of our rotation along with John Lester and Jake Arrieta, so now our rotation is even better.
Yeah,
like we're missing a shortstop, but it's okay because we have another one waiting in the wing. So
right,
there's right.
There's enough option that you can plug in another player there. If I got to, I guess, be in the front office for the day, I'd love to go after Aroldis Chapman. I mean, Rondon's been excellent out of the bullpen in the closer role. I mean, I started a hashtag of Rondon Fan Club on Twitter a couple years ago, but Rondon doesn't throw 102 miles an hour, and I think Kazmir would be a nice add too for the stretch run. Maybe repay Billy Beane for Addison Russell and Billy McKinney.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to repay him. I mean, he still was able to trade Jeff Samardzija back to the White Sox for a couple of nice pieces, so I think Billy Beane's going to be okay.
That's true.
Yeah, he probably was thinking of, he sold it as a retool, but I think he was actually setting up a rebuild because this team, it's not as bad as 14 and 28, but it wasn't going to contend, in my opinion. So I think he will eventually sell, and I'd love to see the Cubs make a run at Kazmir or whatever.
No, I'm right there with you. I didn't realize Toronto was as far away as what they were. I know they've dealt away a lot of pieces from their farm as well. They dealt with Miami And when they and trying to think who else they've traded away with. I mean, they've traded away 7 or 8 guys. I think about Marisnik. I want to say Syndergaard was one of their guys that they traded away. And just if you look down the line, there's 7, 8 guys that are contributing to the major league level that they traded away that were prospects for guys that just aren't getting it done now. So it might be curious to see if Alex Anthopoulos would be interested in trying to restock his farm.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the American League teams right now, except for in the West where just you got a bunch of guys fading out, Toronto being in last place, they're still only 4.5 out of first. Like the Yankees and Tampa Bay are just kind of stagnating. Kansas City has a good record, but even the White Sox are 3.5 games out of the wild card. They're 6.5 back, so they're close enough that they're just like, well, we'll just hang around. But Oakland being 13 games out, I think they're gonna sell. I think Milwaukee will realize, okay, there's absolutely no way we are winning the division unless everybody on St. Louis breaks. So they're probably going to sell. They already sold Giovanni Gallardo. I'm not exactly interested in a Kyle Loesch or a Matt Garza, but who knows? Maybe the scouts see something that I don't.
And then another one that could factor in would be the Rockies. They started out 5-0, but they're 10-23 since that point. They're sitting 8 games back in the West, and they're right down there as one of the bottom 3 teams in the National League right now. Obviously, there's been long rumored of Troy Tulowitzki, the shortstop, and then the left fielder Carlos Gonzalez. I could see. Is it Carlos Gonzalez? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a left fielder.
You would think both of them could bring them a major return, and those would be just 2 other interesting things to follow on the trade market this summer. Not that the Cubs would necessarily need a shortstop, but if Gonzalez could stay healthy, that'd be a pretty significant upgrade there in left field.
Yeah. I feel like if it was up to me, and I guess it has to do with the fact that I'm a kind of a cheap bastard, I would avoid huge money grabs or salary dump kind of trades, because I think that's what Colorado will try to do. Like, in addition to trying to get a good prospect return, they would attempt to have the trade partner team absorb a lot of that contract, and they're like $100 million contracts between him and Troy Tulowitzki. So whoever trades with them, like, I wouldn't trade for Tulowitzki because the Cubs already have a shortstop, or 3 or 5. But Cargo kind of makes sense, except for the fact that he gets hurt all the time. I'm risk adverse, and so if it was up to me, I would minimize the risk and look at the free agents available next year. Like, Zach Greinke's going to opt out of his contract. You got like Jordan Zimmerman, you got David Price, got a bunch of other guys, including Cueto. So why not just say, okay, well, Johnny Cueto is available. Let's just give the Reds like something else, like another Sean Marshall type. But obviously, it'll take more than Sean Marshall to get Johnny Cueto. But that's what I would do. I would try to trade from a position of depth. I would not trade with the Mets, because even though they want a shortstop, there's no way they are giving the Cubs the kind of pitchers that they would want in return. So you're looking at a team that is obviously out of it in the Reds, or who I think will be projected to be soon to be out of it. And you say, okay, what do the Reds need? This is what we have. We're going to get Cueto. We will worry about the depth later because we have a really smart front office, and they will figure out how to reestablish the farm system later. But right now we need that extra rotation piece. And then we can shift one of the other guys, maybe Kyle Hendricks, maybe Shuo Siwata, to a long reliever or a piggyback method. I don't even know what Joe Madden thinks about that. But there's so many different options that we can write like several different blogs about what the Cubs could do, and maybe 9 out of 10 of them would be wrong, and one of them would be so crazy, but it is actually the one thing that they do, and it makes sense.
I know you got to figure it's going to be on a holiday, though, right? If it was anything like last year.
4th of July, Memorial Day. I don't know. It's Memorial Day weekend coming soon, so they already traded away Wellington Castillo, so that's their pre-holiday trade.
There we go.
I think you always see one or two big trades in May before the July 31st deadline. Like I think Kevin Youkilis was a May trade, so that always seems to happen at least one or two. And I guess this was the most major-ish May trade of this particular season was Wellington Castillo for a power arm.
Yeah. Yoervis Medina, I believe the guy's name is. Sounds
Yep.
like he's kind of a Chris Bosio reclamation project. He was hitting mid-90s. It sounds like his ERA was under 3 the past couple of years out of the Mariners bullpen, but instead of hitting 94, 95, he's more like 92, 93. So it'd be interesting to see if the Cubs can help him, find those missing couple of mile an hour. Apparently, he's got a nice curveball to go with it. But if they can get him back up to speed, that's just one more, hard throwing option out of the bullpen. And like we'd said before, bullpens are volatile by nature. So if you happen to find a guy that's not getting it done, and you can call up this Medina guy, and he's able to get it done, then you've helped out the roster this year. And also, he's under control for, I believe it's at least 3 more years, as opposed to Castillo, who's going to be a free agent after next year.
Yep. So when you were at the last series, right? The Pittsburgh series.
I was. Oh, one other thing, real fast.
Sure.
Apparently, Medina, when he was pitching for the Mariners, his walkout music was Funky Cold Medina. So if he ends up getting pulled up and he sticks with that, I think that'd be pretty great.
Yeah, and the Cubs definitely have the sound system to help him out. So yeah, that's what we were trying to transition to. Is you were actually at the last series. Like I was at the opening series, actually. I went to the opening series with my son on a nice day off during spring break because the gentleman from the Cubs and the Haiku said, well, I can't go to this game. Here, have some free tickets. And I said, okay.
That's fantastic.
So, and I saw it with no bleachers and just the left field video board. So you actually got to see fans in 2/3 of the bleachers plus both video boards. What do you think of that?
Well, my seats are down the line. I have a pair of season tickets this year, which I know it's a 3-hour drive, and why I did it, I'm not quite sure. I think because I was on the waiting list for 11 years, but we'll get into that later. But it was nice to see, the crowd filling into the bleachers. The new standing area looks really cool. I think that'd be great for if you're going to have a bachelor party or something like that. The video board's really nice because they were integrated in a way that they feel like they belong. It's not gaudy. It's not like they're going to do kiss cams and all that, stuff like you see at minor league games. The color scheme matches. Even the font that they use on the screen, it's kind of like what you see around other parts of the ballpark, and I feel like it's a good fit. And I remember remarking to somebody sitting beside me on Saturday, there was a close play on a stolen base, and they showed the replay on the left field board, and when they showed a certain angle, you could hear the whole crowd cheer, and I looked over and I was like, yep, I wonder how many of these people that were complaining about the video boards are here today, because I didn't hear a boo like, oh my gosh, why are there video boards here? It was striking, because I attended opening night, and it was striking to see this big, huge thing out in left field that wasn't there before. but you just, I guess you have to embrace the change, and it's really neat to just see how they've integrated it in a way that really it just fits and it just works. The board out in right field, that's cool because they have both teams lineups, so you can look at that. You can see, okay, what's coming up. Is the pitcher going to bat next inning, or are they going to have to wonder about, do we need to replace him for a pinch hitter, things like that. It was about as seamless a transition as you can have, and I think the Cubs need to be applauded for their efforts on it.
Yeah, and when you were observing, you saw like, were there actually fans in the rooftops? I think I saw like one or two, maybe, when I was there. But I'm assuming that with the weekend series, probably would have seen more.
Oh yeah, I know. I know when I went up on opening night, it was bitter cold that night. I think it was in the mid 40s, but the weather was pretty fantastic last weekend. I know there was a threat of rain, but it never did any of the 3 days, and a lot of the rooftop bleachers, had pretty, they were filled almost capacity. There were a couple that looked like they might have been the lower parts of them blocked by the right field board, and you could tell that the fans weren't really going to sit in the lower seats there, but they still, like in their upper few rows, still had quite a few people. So even the rooftops were pretty well attended, and the game Saturday, I want to say, I think might have been about a full sell because I think they announced about 38,000 fans.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. I think like once they open up the new set of bleachers, they are higher and kind of deeper. So I feel like before, when the Cubs could only hold 41,000 in Wrigley Field with the bleachers, now they could probably hold maybe 42 or 40. So that would help with the revenue thing. I feel like if I were just remembering how the boards are set up, the left field board, which is the huge one, is going to block the old United slash Budweiser building, but it's still going to allow vision from the Waveland rooftops.
Yes, that's correct. The behind the Ivy rooftop building, which is the one just inside the left field foul line.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like that one would still have a pretty clear view, and I don't know that there were any out in between the left field video board and center field. I'm trying to remember the setup, but if there was one there, I don't think it would be blocked either. Now, the right field board.
There's
Go ahead.
there's a pretty prominent one on the exact corner of Waveland and Sheffield. I'm trying to remember if that's Murphy's Bleachers or not. I've never actually been to a rooftop, so I'm not as familiar with them. I just prefer to be in the ballpark.
Right.
But there's two directly behind the new right field scoreboard. That's the one. Those are the ones that are suing the Cubs right now. So I thought that was kind of funny. Like, you kind of read the stories, and the Cubs are saying, well, in order to get our tax break, we had to move the video boards and change the plans. But I don't know, serendipitously, we're actually blocking the two rooftops that are suing us. So
Right.
how about that?
It's funny how that works out.
Yeah, so the cynic in you would be like, well, obviously Ricketts gave somebody on the board a suitcase full of money. So, but if you were just pure business, you'd say that was money well spent because they got what they want, and they're bankrupting the rooftops so they could buy them all. So if what you say is true and there was a good attendance on the rooftops, then that's another revenue stream that the Ricketts are going to have directly instead of just taking 17%.
Right, because I kind of cut out a couple minutes ago. I don't know if you'd mentioned it, but it sounds like just today it was announced that they purchased 3 more.
Yes.
Okay, and the position of 2 of them was like they're the very far ones down the right field line, like
Mm-hmm.
the very last one that looks kind of like a home plate that's kind of angled compared to the rest of them, and the one right next to it, and then there's one looked like it would be 1 or 2 over from the right field board, like towards center field. Looked like that was the position. I broke out the Google Maps or the Google Earth on my phone just to kind of see what the position was of those.
Yeah, I can pull up an article on that, but yeah, the Ricketts pretty much bought some primo rooftops, and it's just a matter of time before they figure out what to do with the two that are suing them. But this lawsuit doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. It's just kind of in limbo right now. So I think they're okay.
Yeah, I believe one of the two dropped the suit, and if not both. I know the judge a few weeks ago had said, there was an injunction they tried to get, and the judge said no, and basically you have, you know, a losing argument. You're not going to win this argument if you try. So you can continue on, but just wouldn't be worth your time. It would just be a waste of my time, your time, and everybody's time. So if they can continue to purchase up the property and integrate the rooftop bleacher experience into the ballpark, I think all the better. Not that I'm like, yay, corporations making money, but if they do what they say and get the extra money and they dump it back into the team, and that helps them get the extra piece that they need to win a World Series, then I am completely on board with that.
Right. I believe. Let me just like clear my thoughts real quick. But I believe that there's one right next to Bricks and Ivy, which is next to the Chicago Fire Station, that the Ricketts now own. They own Chicago Cubs rooftop, 3639 Sheffield. They own the one right next to it, and then further down the line, there's two that look like they're directly behind the scoreboard. And I'm not sure if those are the... No. You know what? The scoreboard blocks down the line and skybox on Sheffield and maybe Lakeview Baseball Club. And the two right past it, which is directly to the south of the scoreboard, but then still look in, those are the ones that the Ricketts bought. So they actually avoided every rooftop that are suing them right now. So that's kind of convenient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like my point of view is that the way they scaffolded the bleachers on top of the rooftops is kind of tacky, so I don't really like that. I hope that once they are able to figure out what they do, they make it look more streamlined so that it looks like another set of seats rather than just a bunch of hodgepodge bleachers. I think it'll look much better for the ballpark aesthetically.
Absolutely, no, I'm on board with that, because you see some of them are blue, some of them are just metal. But yeah, if they can make them all green and look just like the benches out in the bleacher section now, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know how feasible it is, but build like some land bridges in between the ballpark and the rooftops that they now own. Or like you've seen San Diego, and I'm guessing that you have cable, so because I haven't been able to see many of these games in San Diego, but the San Diego has that old construction building. Baltimore has that brick building on, I think, Eulaw Street that you always see at Camden Yards.
Yep, that's
Colorado.
Yep.
Yeah. Colorado has a few like rooftop type buildings. So they can be incorporated just like you see in San Diego or in Baltimore. It's definitely feasible, and I'm kind of excited to see what'll happen.
Say, St. Louis recently launched some rooftop type seating as well. There at the New Busch Stadium.
Well, New Busch is actually a really nice stadium. I have to give them that. Not only do they have a better baseball team, but they have a pretty nice stadium. I'm kind of annoyed about that, but credit where credit is due, right?
No, I agree.
Yeah, but if the Cubs continue to hold this lead, can't tell you too much because we don't have express written consent of Major League Baseball, but they can get within 3.5 games of St. Louis, and then this rivalry will really get interesting.
It's funny you mentioned the game tonight. It was supposed to be on Comcast Sports Plus, which is not available here in Fort Wayne. And since Fort Wayne's within my region of the blackout for the Cubs, I did not get to watch the game tonight. So I have no idea what's even going on. So hooray for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bummer. So I'm just following on game day right now, and eventually I'll turn on the radio. But I'm hoping that you are within not WGN anymore, but WBBM's broadcast range.
Yeah, you can pick it up here. It's a little fuzzy, but it's still listenable for AM radio.
Okay. Well, I am thinking I will go to Wednesday's game against the Nats with Anno. I think whenever you come by, I will take you up on that game. I'll probably buy you a beer and a hot dog.
Works for me.
But yeah, we need to end this at some point. See how Kyle Hendricks is doing actually live, so that we don't actually. What's the word? We don't step on Major League Baseball shoes and get ourselves sued, basically.
Absolutely. No, I'm there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So next time, I think Anna will be a lot better. He needs a lot of chicken soup right now. Thank you for hanging out with us, Josh, and we will see you again on the Twitters.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the chance to pinch hit in the clutch here.
Yeah, you should always feel free to join in. And Josh is now actually sort of writing for World Series Dreaming. He'll have a blog at some point when he has time. But yes, you are now officially a part of the team.
All right, sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for hanging out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was fun.
I agree.
So once again, this is World Series Dreaming. You can find us at worldseriesdreaming.com, on Facebook, and on Twitter. See the show notes for details. Thanks again to Josh. Thanks to Anno for hosting this, and we will post this super soon. So by the time you see this, it will have already been posted. Really quick, who's number 48?
I've actually got that pulled up. Some highlights are Andy Pafko, 44 to 51. Joe Niekro from 67 to 69. Rick Russell from 72 to 81 and 84. Probably the coolest name is Jay Baller from 85 to 87.
Okay, this is good. We will call this the Baller Dreamcast.
Yes, good. There it is.
Let's do this. Baller. All right. Have a lovely night, everybody.
Have a lovely baller night.
What? All right, bye.
Bye.